All right, let's get into week 6. It was a pretty crazy week. Obviously, Mark is gone, and that was a huge surprise. Some huge weeks from DJ Moore and Jamar, both 3 touchdown games. So, I mean, the entire league's seemingly been flipped on its head at this point. We'll get into that. But, yeah, wild week. As said, Mark Basali is gone, 14th place. Extremely unexpected. He was the strongest team in the league on paper and had top of the league fab left to spend. So that is a huge turn of events for the league. It really makes it anyone's game at this point. But it also tells you that no one's safe. It doesn't matter how good your team looks on paper. You just need one week where all your guys just don't perform extremely well. And there you go. I mean, it becomes more volatile, I would say, as we get less teams because now the teams are on average better. So a couple of bad performances can really tank you for a week. But yeah, rest in peace, Basali. Now Ryan's whatever it is, co-manager of his team, and now head meme maker if he so desires. All right, top 25% of this week. Pretty wild turnaround because the three of us here were towards the bottom last week. That being JC, me, and Jake. JC taking the top spot, getting himself the star. Average score this week of 149. That is obviously down from last week because last week was inflated by Ben. But yeah, average was 176 last week, 149 this week. In the grand scheme of things, this average, if we forget last week, the average has very consistently gone up. It just spiked last week because of Ben. So yeah, generally we're trending up. Last week also will be down a little bit because of the bye weeks that happened. But yeah, that's about it for that. Now on to the bottom 25%, the ice cold of week 5. Fleming taking the cake as the worst team this week that didn't get eliminated. Mitchell and Tom appearing here as well. Average score from these guys of an 84, which is the highest average we've seen from the bottom 25%. It's up 19% from last week. The bottom seems to be more fluctuating. The top, like I said, besides that last week where Ben inflated it, it's been consistently climbing. But this bottom has been all over the place. Like week 3, we saw a pretty similar bottom 25% to week 1, which is kind of crazy. But it really just depends on how many bad weeks some players have, and that can really affect it. So up 19% though from last week. Now we're looking ahead to tonight, Thursday night football. We've got Broncos and Chiefs. This shouldn't be close. I mean, it'd be funny if the Broncos made this close. Chiefs are minus 11, and the over-under is 47. I don't really care about any of that. I could see the Broncos covering, but some big players tonight, obviously from the Chiefs. We got Mahomes, Kelsey, and Pacheco. From the Broncos, we've got Judy, Sutton, and Javonte, who I believe is playing. If not, then Jaleel. Yeah, that's really it from this game. I don't really want to linger on it too long. But what I do want to start doing, because the Thursday night football game is fun to watch and it's a good way to start the week, but it's not that decisive. The Monday night football game is what's way more decisive and exciting. So, and this is a good one. We've got lots of big name players on these teams that people are starting. Herbert, Keenan Allen, Eckler on the Chargers, and CeeDee Lamb, Pollard, Dallas defense. I don't think anyone's starting Dak. Cowboys are favored -2, over under 50.5. This should be a really good game. I look forward to it. I have CD, so if I'm still in the running towards the end of the week, I can be relying on him. But yeah, that's really it for this game. Now looking at how the standings have changed after week 5, Basali sitting at the very top, and this is with last week's score. With last week's lowest scoring performance, Basali is still at the top of the league in total season scoring. which is it's crazy. Like, I don't think we'll ever see something that crazy in all the years that we end up doing this league. That's going to take the cake, I think, for a while for the most unexpected elimination. Joey, though, is climbing. Ben is also up there still. JC's been up there. He's staying up there. Jake climbed a bit this week into the 5 spot. The funny thing is, I think Basali might still be... He won't be in 14th next week, I don't think, unless, Jack, Cooper, and Ryan all score 130, 140. We're still going to see Basali above them on total points on the year, even with one less week played. So that is pretty amusing. He might even be middle of the pack. He might be still around 7 or 8. Just depends on how high scoring we are this week. I think that's really all to say. Ryan has fallen to the very bottom, and the only other notable movements are me climbing up. I finally had a good week. I'm now just around the middle of the pack, and Potter moved up a decent bit into 7th. But, yeah. Now let's take a look at the economy. Tom's sitting at the top now. He hasn't made a move since, week 2, and he's just sitting, a significant move since week 2. Has 90 fab. He owns 15% of the market. The average market share this week is 7.7, roughly, 7.69, which is $46. And, yeah, about half the league is above that, half the league's below it. We've got 13 people left. Ryan and I sitting up there pretty well with Johnny, JC as well. Ben and Potter just above that line, and then Mitchell's just below it. And then we have our bottom 5, which are, well below the line. Obviously, Saunders and Cooper at 0. But, yeah, 594 left in circulation. We are burning through it fast. And I contributed a lot to that because I spent a lot in free agency this week. But not a lot of fab left in the market. Not a lot. Okay. We're sticking with this view, because guess what? It happened again. A top 3 team in fab got eliminated every single week this year. It's crazy. I mean, that's part of the reason why the fab left in the market is so low, is because these high fab teams keep getting eliminated. And in all the circumstances, or in all the cases except for Basali, the teams that had a lot of fab also weren't making a lot of moves, so it kind of makes sense. Like, you're not using your fab to make your team better, so you got eliminated. But Mark did make his team better, but then he also traded away some of his smaller players to get some fab back. So he was really sitting pretty at 94, but gets eliminated. I was very much likely to get eliminated. I just performed really well last week. But if this trend continues, we will see me, Ryan, or Tom get eliminated this week, or Johnny. I actually do think Johnny's more on the edge than us 3 here, but we'll get into that. But sticking with the top 3, it would be me, Ryan, or Tom. But I do think it's just been a coincidence so far, and good for the people who have survived, because less fab in the market. All right, as we know, Jake took the cake this week. It's flip-flopped every single week, so if this keeps going, Ben's taking it next week. Jake with a 134 points last week, weekly rank of 3. Ben with 94, weekly rank of 7. One final look at this trade, because now it's an even. Each of these guys had 2 weeks with the running back that they both spent about the same amount that they gave to Basali. Achan with another good week. He's now injured, obviously. And in the case of Jake, he traded away Rashad White. So this is the perfect time to stop looking at this after this week. 2 weeks started. Achan obviously blew it out of the water 3 times more, or Ben in this trade got 3 times more value out of it than Jake did. So yeah, congrats, Ben. You killed it on that trade. That's been a good one for now. Hopefully Achan's not hurt for too long. Positional rankings. Ben's team on paper, this is rest of season, I believe, is looking pretty good. No red. No one even really in the double digit of rank, except for quarterback, which I believe is Purdy, which isn't even that bad. And then Jake, some weak spots at running back and tight end, but he's got Mahomes, so that's obviously going to help him out. And decent running backs, or decent wide receivers as well. So that is it. And I guess I should mention Ben is still 60-plus points ahead of Jake on points scored on the year. mainly because of that 200-point week, but he is losing in the head-to-head matchup. All right, some Week 5 takeaways. I've added a graphic or a visual for the defenses that's similar to the tight end graphic. But we'll start with the tight ends. We had a 0-point scoring tight end. That was not obviously, in case you didn't know, that was Mark having a 0-point scoring tight end with Hunter Henry. So this data point here is Mark. We had 2 tight ends as the team's top scorers, and 5 of them were in the top 3 scorers for teams. So tight ends came up huge this week. This was like the first week where tight ends were very balanced. We saw some, it's very spread out here, as you can see. There's not a big clump somewhere, usually here towards the bottom, the 4 to 8 range, but we have plenty of tight end scoring in the double digits last week, which is good for everybody, I guess. The average of 11.6. Still a pretty high deviation, but now that average is a lot higher, so a little less variability. And then for the defenses, we have every single week seen a top scoring defense, a team where a team's top scorer was a defense. We had 3 top 3 scorers this week. That's pretty standard for what we've seen. We did see our highest average defensive score this week with almost 11. And now we get to see it distributed like this. We have, obviously, it's nice to have one of these high-scoring defenses that really helps your team, especially if the rest of your team isn't good. We saw that a couple times this week, like Mitchell with the Raiders defense coming up big for him on Monday, and some others as well. We'll get into them, but we'll look at this Eric curse. I don't think there is an Eric curse, as no one who's played me recently has gotten eliminated. I've now played Mitchell twice, and I'm about to play Ryan for the second time. Mitchell survived both times, but he has had a very low scoring finish every time he's played me, so maybe there's something to be said there, but, I'm playing Ryan this week, so we'll see, but not much to say there. But what I do want to talk about, a new topic for the slide, is the bye weeks, because one thing to note, like I mentioned on the top 25% slide, is that the top 25% came down by 15%. Last week, and that you could argue is partially because of Ben's inflating last week, or because there were 4 significant teams on bye this week. Last week, Chargers, Browns, Seahawks, Bucks. We're going to keep an eye on that. This week, only 2 teams on bye, and they're much less significant, Packers and Steelers. I don't think anyone's starting either of the quarterbacks there. There are still some teams obviously affected by these byes, but it's just not as widely affecting the league. Upcoming, though, looking at the next 2 weeks, there's 6 teams on bye in week 7, and that is crazy. So we will see a lot of movement week 7, potentially an unexpected exit from a team if they have a lot of bye week 7s. The only other bye week that has 6 teams is week 13, which won't be as significant because if you're alive in week 13, there's probably plenty of good players to go around, so it doesn't matter that 6 teams are on bye. But this one upcoming in week 7 is going to be pretty wild, and then follow that up with a 0 teams on bye in week 8. So we'll be back into full force where a full roster is, everyone's best possible roster should be starting in week 8. So I bet we'll see the actual worst team probably get eliminated week 8. That's at least my theory. All right, into the graphics as we do. First off, the next week versus rest of season look. It's a pretty linear here, or at least in the green. If you're good now, you also seem to be pretty good for the rest of season. That being Joey, Cooper, Potter, and JC up there in the green. A lot of people floating around in the yellow, meaning you either look good now or you look good for the future, but not necessarily now. And the only teams in the bad here are Johnny, Mitchell, and Ben, just barely. It's really just Johnny and Mitchell, I would say, that are kind of in trouble, and the fact that they look bad this week and they don't have a great outlook for the rest of the season either. But we'll get into more of that. Obviously, Johnny has some fab to work with, more than Mitchell, so Johnny can pull himself out of there if he can survive this week. Now, just a this week view of Fantasy Pros versus Sleeper. A lot in the red. Johnny's still way down there. Mitchell's pretty down there. Tom and Saunders and I are in here as well, but more towards the middle. Ben and Jack in the yellow, meaning Sleeper here likes them more than Fantasy Pros. And then we got plenty in the green here. A lot of agreement with Sleeper and Fantasy Pros on who's the better teams this week. Joey, Cooper, Potter, JC, Ryan, and Jake are all up there in the green. So in theory, those teams should be safe. But as we know, in theory, nothing is predictable. In this league, Mark was way up here and he was way up here in both these graphics. So just like Joey is here. No one's safe. Nobody is safe. And finally, the position strength versus your budget. This is where I am finally in a green. I've pulled my way in. Made a lot of acquisitions this week, and still I'm holding on to a top half of the league fab. Ryan staying up there with his fab. He didn't make a lot of moves. JC, his team is just really good, and he hasn't made a lot of moves, so he's held on to his fab. And Ben is also in here in the green. Top left, kind of where I was last week. Johnny has taken my spot as having a lot of budget, but his team right now is kind of in a tough spot. But if you learned anything from me last week, that doesn't necessarily matter. You just need to survive 1 week, and you're on to the next, and you can make a lot of moves to change your standing. Tom is also way up there, top middle. Tons of fab, but his team's a little weak. And if you look at the bottom right, Joey having a very strong team. He just spent 40 to get Diggs, so now his team is even stronger, but he has less fab. Cooper and Saunders are in here as well. Potter's floating right around the middle. Can't really make a distinction, but technically he's in the bottom half of the league of position strength, but just in the top half of budget, so it seems to be an okay spot to be. But Jack has finally slid very far to the left, where his team is now below the average of the league on position strength, and he doesn't have a lot of fab left to work with. Jake and Mitchell are also here in the red, so their teams are arguably not that strong, and they don't have a ton of fab to make it better. So it's never a great spot to be, but things can change. Okay, so in summary, this is how I've stacked everyone up this week. JC is still in the green. Last week, I think I had JC, Mark, and Ben up here. Mark obviously getting eliminated, so the green does not mean you're safe. It would just mean you're likely to be safe, but that doesn't mean anything, I guess. So JC's team is still very solid, and he hasn't spent much, so he still has a lot of fab to work with now relative to the rest of the league. So he's in a great spot. I have now moved Joey over here, even though he is lower on fab, and I am partial to a team having a lot of fab. I think that makes you really strong for the long run. Joey is definitely in the bottom half of the league at fab, but his team is just so dominant right now, and probably will be. Like I look at his team and I think it can be a good team for more than just like 3 weeks. It'll be a good team for 5 to 7 more weeks. So having low fab doesn't really matter to him right now, I would say. Kind of a tier below those two, but also solid overall. I have Potter and Ben. Potter and Ben did pretty similar things this week. I think they both got marginally better. Potter got Justin Jefferson for the future, so that really makes his future look really good. Ben got Puka. They both have good fab as well. They're both in the top half or floating right around the middle on fab, but their teams are really good, so I think they're in fine spots. Now looking at the good and short-term, questionable long-term top left, Cooper with 2.5. It's a lot, obviously. I'm on the charts, but Cooper, he's a short-term safety this week by making his team better, but he doesn't have any fab left, I believe. I'm mixing him up with someone else, but I don't think he has a lot of fab or 0 fab left to work with. So he's good now, but that's not a good look for the future. Jake also, as we mentioned, lower on the fab, but his team should be good enough this week to survive. Jack, as we've mentioned, he's now slid down in that fab chart. He's been in this yellow this entire season, but now he's in the red. I still think he's okay in the short term. His matchups are fine this week. He should survive, but that fab is concerning. Saunders, the other team at 0 fab. His team is good, decent enough to survive now, but 0 fab for making moves in the future. So, like I said, I'm partial to that. I think having 0 fab at this point in the season is a tough spot to be. But yeah, bottom right now, iffy in the short term, promising in the long term. I think Ryan is in here. I think there's a case to be made that Ryan could be in the top right and the solid overall, kind of in that tier with Potter and Ben. I think he's just below it, and I think I'm going to stick him here because I don't think he's out of the woods for this week necessarily, whereas I think Potter and Ben are much less likely to get eliminated this week. I could be wrong about that, but that's my take here. Ryan seems pretty solid, but he's got a good long-term outlook because of the fab that he has. I'm kind of in the same spot. I made my team a lot better, but I still think I'm not extremely strong in terms of short-term security, but I have a lot of fab just like Ryan, so I can continue to survive and improve my team. And Tom is another one where he's 90 fab, top of the league in fab. So that's why I think all three of us here have a promising long-term just because of our fab, but all three of us are not out of the woods, I think, for getting eliminated this week. Although this is the safest I've felt all year, so I do feel pretty confident. I mean, everyone should feel confident in their team, but someone's got to go. And now new into the danger zone, we have Johnny and Mitchell. Both of these have never been in the bottom left, I don't believe. I could be wrong about that, but at least last week they weren't, and now they are. Johnny, he trades away Justin Jefferson because he was put on IR. I don't know how I feel about that move. I mean, he gets that 20 fab that he can work with to make his team better in the short term, or save it to make, save it, and then that money gets a lot more valuable as time goes on. But right now, Johnny's team is definitely on the lower end of the projections of scoring this week, and Mitchell is kind of in the same boat where his projection isn't great this week. It's higher than Johnny's, but I just feel like other teams in the league got a lot better, and these two teams did not. So, and their projections for this week kind of reflect that. So yeah, both these guys have tough matchups, I would say, as well. And Johnny, the one thing to note is he has a lot of injuries on his team. There's like Tank Dell, who's questionable with a concussion, and I don't have them all off the top of my head, but he has some guys that aren't a lock to start this week. That could make his team even worse if they don't, because he doesn't have a ton of depth on his bench right now, I wouldn't say. But yeah, I think my guess would be, as always, one of these five in the bottom should be it. And that would align with if I go back to this, Tom, bottom right, Ryan, bottom right, me, bottom right, Johnny, bottom left. We're the top four in the league in fab, but we're all, looking a little iffy in the short term. So it kind of would align with the theory, the teams with high fab getting eliminated, and also my theory that I think one of these two boxes are your chopping block. But yeah. All right. Moving on. This will be the last week we look at this. One final look at how everyone's trades panned out with Mark before he got eliminated. Mitchell takes the cake. 1 point he got to start Sutton for 3 weeks. Average 1.3 points per week per fab spent. Pretty solid. Ryan, to look at him, he was a late addition to this game show. Gets 0.6 points per fab out of Jahan Dotson. He didn't do that much last week, but Ryan only spent $7, so no harm done, I guess. Ben also with some good looks here, as we mentioned. Achan, McLaurin also a 0.6. It's really Jack and Jake here that just, it wasn't the best move. They overspent on their guys. White is now not on Jake's team, and obviously Jack's still sticking with Olave, but he's kind of underperformed from this value that he paid for him. But that 114 fab that went to Mark doesn't even matter anymore. It's all gone. All gone into the abyss. All right, team by team, starting with Jake, who led the league last week, gets his first star. He's kind of had an up and down season, but JC's he's got a good team. He's in the green in my breakdown in the good overall or solid overall. I mean, the only move he's made this season was acquiring Jalen Hurts. So he made no significant moves this week. He picks up Hunter Henry to start over Kincaid, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. His team here is mostly drafted. Almost every single person here, I think, besides Chuba and Hunter Henry and maybe the defense. No, I think including the defense was drafted. Almost his entire team here was drafted. So he just really killed the draft. He had to make the move for Hurts after the Rodgers injury, and that's worked out great for him. And now his team's just really solid. and he still has Fab to work with. So I think JC is the new Mark, I would say. He's really in the... He's not that far above the rest, but he is the one, I would argue. He's the team to be right now. Coming in second, me. Who would have thought? I never would have thought. Brees coming up big for me. Sam Howell was a huge addition and a good spot start for me, and D-Hop also was a good spot start. I just had those two guys for 1 week, and I've moved on from both of them. Looking forward to this week, my running backs are not looking great, but the rest of my team should be okay, I believe. I got Fields, CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, and KJ Osborne for a total of 55. I unfortunately overpaid for Fields, but I'll live with it because I love his matchup this week against the Vikings, and I think he has a decent schedule going forward. But yeah, my team last week was just a ragtag team of guys, and they rallied together to give me my first top 25 appearance, my first flame. It was a slow start to the season for me. I also got Ayuk and Foreman in trades, and I'm still sitting at 75 fab, so I'm feeling okay. I've got some tough matchups this week, though, that put me somewhat a little shaky this week, but I'm feeling pretty good. All right, Jake's team coming in third, also getting the flame. DJ Moore leading the way for him. 45 points, 3 touchdowns. That'll do it. Hard to not be in the top 3 when you have a guy like DJ Moore or in JC's case, Jamar. That's where I'll give myself a little shout out here. I didn't even have anyone break 30, which I know that's a high score, but I just had a lot of people scoring in the teens that aren't shown here in the top 3. But JC with the big play from Jamar and Jake with the big play from DJ. So Jake essentially, he has that big week from DJ Moore, and then he trades him, sells high on him, which I think is always a smart thing to do. But then I think he overpaid for Kyron. So he was net positive on Fab this week. He gained Fab a little bit. He's still down there at the bottom with 28. But, I think his team's still pretty solid. Loses DJ Moore, gains Kyron. That's the way to look at it. Also, Jonnu Smith, who he might be starting this week, it seems. Pretty decent-looking team, you can argue. So, yeah, that is it for Jake. Potter's team, Potter doesn't have a lot of accolades. He just has one trash can. He's floated around this, close to the bottom and close to the top sometimes, but he's not quite in the bottom or top 25%. But Tyreek Hill, another big week. Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty is back, but he traded him away, so that doesn't matter anymore. He gets Lamar in free agency to replace Burrow, who he trades away for minimal fab. Also picks up the 2 Cardinals running backs, Amari and Keontae Ingram. Amari DeMarcado, I don't know how to pronounce it, but one of those 2 guys should be the guy while James Conner is out on IR for a bit. But he also, like we mentioned before, gains Justin Jefferson from Johnny. That's kind of playing the long game with that. I don't think he overspent either. 20 is not a ridiculous amount to spend on that. He also gets Akers in the trade where he gives away Burrow and gained a little fab back. So sitting at 50 fab. If he can survive to the return of Justin Jefferson, he has by far the strongest wide receiver core with Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and Tyreek Hill. That's just nuts. So, and he has JSN. There's always still the chance that JSN pops off later in the season. I could still see that happening. So, yeah, Potter's team looking pretty strong right now, I would say. Now Joey's team. Joey is very, very solid if you look at it based on this bar chart here of each of his players. Besides Kirk, his lowest relative position rank is Michael Pittman at 4 as a wide receiver 2. But Diggs, Michael Pittman, and Marquise Brown, and then running backs Pollard, Raheem Mostert, and DeAndre Swift. Those are just 3 stud running backs, 3 stud receivers. Maybe you don't argue that Pittman and Marquise Brown are studs, but relatively they are, I would say. Eagles defense is a good matchup this week. Kirk, he's fine. He really should be green in my opinion. It's just based off matchup this week. Which is the Bears, by the way, so I don't know why that's low. But yeah, he acquires Diggs for 40. Joey's been generally pretty quiet. He makes his couple big claims, like he did 40 for Diggs. He did 30 or something for Pittman back then. So those have been his big moves so far. Yeah, those are the three. I got him. Diggs for 40, Pittman for 30, and then 8 in a trade for Mostert. So there's his 78 that he spent. So yeah, really, really safe looking team here for Joey. Just a little low on the fab. Next up is Cooper. Another big week from Josh Allen. He's been carrying him thus far. He gets Keenan Allen back from bye this week, and he also adds some strong pieces in Josh Jacobs and DJ Moore. So he does completely deplete the bank. 0 fab left, but he's got a really solid-looking team. So this should buy him plenty of short-term security. We'll just see how he plays it now that he has 0 fab. It's always hard to do anything when you don't have fab, in my opinion, this early in the year. But a solid team, a really solid-looking team, so can't argue with it. Ben coming in at 7th. Big week from Purdy, 26. Achane obviously doing his thing with 21. He is now hurt, so he picks up Jeff Wilson, or gets Jeff Wilson in a trade. He might see some playing time, who knows. Also gets Zach Moss, who seems to still get plenty of work, even though Jonathan Taylor was back last week, but we'll see how that continues to develop if they start giving the job fully back to Jonathan Taylor, or if Moss keeps it and they keep it as a committee, who knows. But gets Puka for 21 in free agency. I think that's a great addition and not an overpay. I would also say Joey spending 40 on Diggs I don't think is an overpay either, even though 40 is a lot. I think Diggs is that valuable, I would say. He's a guy you can start probably till the end of the year. So yeah, Puka for 21 should be good too. I still think he sees a big role in the Rams offense, even with Cooper Kupp back. Yeah, it's a lot of talking, but I think Ben's team is still looking pretty good. And one thing I'll mention, I don't know when the right time during this presentation would be the time to mention this, but I think what I'm seeing, or how I'm thinking about it, is this is the time of year where, you really got to figure out what your team is and what is your strategy for the rest of the year. This is where you may want to start going after players that you could see yourself starting like almost all the way to the end of the year. Because if not, then you could argue, if you can only see yourself starting a guy for 3 more weeks, then what value is that besides the short-term value? And if you really want to win this whole thing, which is what it's all about, you just got to make smart moves. So yeah, acquiring those top 5 within their respective position group guys is huge. And I think those will be the teams that make it far in this league. And teams that have fab, obviously. That helps too. All right, moving on to Ryan's team. Stays at 8th place. Been right around the middle of the pack for a couple weeks after having a hot and then cold start. Thielen leading the way with 23. Montgomery being a stud, getting 20. Waddle with 12. Ryan makes some pretty smart moves this week. He acquires the Texans D, and this includes late week moves from last week. So Texans D and Breda. And then Stafford just today. He then goes ahead and trades Breda for 7 when he got him for 0. So that's obviously a great move from Ryan. Just 7 free fab. He'll take that. Looks like Ryan has a decision to make between Goff and Stafford this week. But Ryan sits towards the top of the market in fab. But he's sticking with his guys this week. He didn't really make any major changes. So Ryan's feeling good about his team. Johnny's team coming in 9th. Saints D leading the way. Here was our top scoring defense of the week. Really kind of saved Johnny. He was not looking fantastic this week. But the Saints defense pulling him up was a huge thing for him. Tyjae Spears coming in clutch with 15. He acquires Baker, Kendra Miller, and Justice Hill. I think he dropped Kendra, though, after he got Stafford. So no longer any Kendra, but Baker will be his starter this week with Anthony Richardson on IR, unfortunately, with the, I think, AC joint sprain. So it's unfortunate to see, but the rest of Johnny's team is okay. The analytics doesn't love him. He's got some tough matchups this week, so that is why we're seeing a lot of red and yellow, no greens here for Johnny's team. He also gets Quentin Johnson in that trade where he gives away Jefferson. So in the grand scheme of things, I think Johnny's in a tough spot this week, but has a lot of fab to work with for the future. Trading away Justin Jefferson is not a great look for his future. Even though he's injured and going to be out at least 4 weeks, I think it's hard to move on from a guy like that. But that 20 fab will definitely provide Johnny with more room to work with in the short term if he needs to spend it to keep himself safe or save it for the late game. So it's up to Johnny to decide. But he's looking a little iffy this week, I would say. Now Jack, WCU's team, stays in 10th for 2 weeks in a row. Kelsey leading the way for him. A.J. Dillon and Drake London putting up good weeks. He had a late trade to get A.J. Dillon because I believe Aaron Jones was ruled out. I believe that was the situation if he's the guy with Aaron Jones. But A.J. Dillon coming in clutch for him, scoring a touchdown when he was not necessarily safe at all going into Monday night. So Dillon helped him get out of that hole and pulled him out of the bottom 25% actually. And then makes a lot of little moves. He obviously doesn't have a lot of fab to work with. So he gets Miles Sanders, Jeff Wilson, who he traded away subsequently, and Geno Smith and the Browns defense for free, all for free, and then gets Burrow and Dillon in a trade and gains 10 fab back. So yeah, still not a lot of fab to work with, but I think with a little fab, this is about as good as you can do with moves you can make. And his team is still decent, but it's definitely slipping down in the relative strength in the league. But I think he's okay. He should be okay for now, but no guarantee. Now we're into the bottom 25%. Those of you who are getting the ice cube or the trash can. Tom up first in 11th. Kittle led the way for him big time. That was a monster performance on Sunday night to pull him out of the hole that he was in. Tom was probably the betting favorite to get eliminated before Sunday night football happened. And then it really became Mark and Mitchell who were in the running Monday to get eliminated. Steelers D was huge again for Tom. And then Bijan should always be probably one of his top 3 scorers. Especially with how not very deep his team is. I think Bijan should be in the top 3 most weeks. Jonathan Taylor, like I said, TBD on when he gets truly involved and if he'll ever be the the running back 1 there. He should, based on what he's getting paid. But yeah, I think still to be seen when Jonathan Taylor will get that full workload or a majority workload. He makes no moves this week. He's hoping probably to bounce back from all those bye weeks he had last week, like Herbert, and Chris Godwin, and Jerome Ford. Those guys are all back. He gets the Rams defense to start this week with the Steelers on bye. Still has 90 fab. He's yet to make any big moves, so we'll see what he ends up doing with that, but he's definitely a candidate to be eliminated this week with not a great projection. And we just how the trend's been going where high fab teams get eliminated, so we will see. But first ice cube on the year. Now Mitchell's team comes in 3rd to last, gets his first ice cube. He had a trash can, but now he has an ice cube as well. Tua and Laporta leading the way there. Pacheco with a solid game. Mitchell makes no free agency move this week, which is interesting because he just barely survived last week. And that was not because of bye weeks or anything. This is still the same team he had last week. He traded away Ayuk for Reynolds and Fab, so that's a slight downgrade on the receiver, potentially, but gets some fab back, which helps him for the longer term. So, yeah, he's sticking with his squad here. So far, it's been enough to survive week to week, even with some close-ish calls. But, yeah, this is his team. And coming in 2nd to last, getting his 2nd trash can of the year, is Fleming Saunders. George Pickens with a huge week that helped him out big time. Stroud and Kmet in his top 3 as well. He's got a good-looking team here. Now that he has Kenneth Walker back from bye, Mike Evans back from bye if he isn't hurt. He acquires DeAndre Hopkins from me in a trade. That plugs right into his flex, and that's a pretty strong flex too, according to the analytics. Good running backs. Good 2 running backs. I think those are really his only running backs, though. And then a solid core of receivers. I think, last week was a result of bye weeks and just some off weeks from his players. I think his team is pretty decent in the short term, as I had mentioned on the breakdown slide where he's in the top left and good in the short term. questionable long term because he has no fab. So he looks fine now, but 0 fab hurts him a lot. And there's a lot of questionable players on his team, meaning questionable injury status. I believe Mike Evans is one of them. Devontae Adams too? I forget, but I know Evans is one of them. So he would surely hope to have Evans in his lineup this week. And lastly, one last look at Mark. We've said it already. Like he just the strongest team in the league. Like not even close, I would say. On paper, that is. You look at this. This was his look going into last week. Lots of green, no one in the red. He ended up starting Hunter Henry here, got him 0. That hurts. Defense as well. He had a 0 or a 1 from his defense, so maybe that speaks to the defense and tight end value that those two guys dudded for him, and he got eliminated. He had some decent top players with 20 from Diggs, 17 from Jacobs, 17 from Puka, but just not enough from the rest of the team. Starting Lamar over Fields ended up being the decision that ended him. He starts Fields, and he's not dead right now, so that always will sting if you make a decision that was kind of a toss-up, you could argue, just from matchup base, that Fields might have had a better matchup. These AFC North division games usually tend to be lower scoring, especially Ravens Steelers. That's just always like we know how that goes. But yeah, after a dominant first 4 weeks, Basali's one bad week resulted in a league-shifting elimination. I think it opens up the league for anyone to take that top spot. Like right now, I think it's JC and Joey kind of dominating the league right now. JC more so because he still has fab. But yeah, sad to see Mark go. He was very active in the trade market. But yeah, gets eliminated with 94 fab. And that is the end for Mark. That basically wraps up the Week 6 preview. Don't feel safe. Never, ever feel safe. You never know when you could be the one. So, yeah, good luck, everyone.